My mother, Helen, planned her second wedding with the meticulous precision of a military general mapping out an invasion. Every detail, from the exact shade of ivory for the tablecloths to the specific vintage of champagne, was a critical component of what she called the vision. Her fiancé, Robert, a kind and stable man who seemed perpetually amused by her intensity, simply smiled and signed the checks. I, her only daughter, Clara, was designated maid of honor, a role I accepted with a familiar sigh. For Mom, love was a performance, and this wedding was her Broadway debut. My own love story was far less curated. I had Liam. Liam, with his easy laugh, his encyclopedic knowledge of bad 80s movies, and his quiet strength. He was my rock, my partner, my everything. Liam also had Crohn's disease. It wasn't a secret. He'd been diagnosed years ago, and we had built our life around its unpredictable nature. Most days, he was perfectly fine, his symptoms managed by medication and a careful diet. But a flare-up could be debilitating, leaving him exhausted, in pain, and unable to stray far from a bathroom. It was a chronic illness, not a contagious one. It was a part of him, like his hazel eyes or his crooked smile, and I loved all of it. My mother, however, saw it as a flaw. An unsightly crack in the perfect facade of the family she wanted to present. The first sign of trouble came during a tasting at the reception venue. Liam had been feeling great for weeks, and he was charming my mother's future in-laws, making them laugh with a story about our disastrous first attempt at baking bread. "Clara, darling," my mother said, pulling me aside with a grip on my elbow that was a little too tight. Her smile was a perfect, painted-on slash of coral lipstick. "Is Liam really feeling up to this? A whole day of standing, and photos, and rich food. It seems like a lot for someone in his condition." "Mom, he's fine," I said, keeping my voice low. "He knows his limits. He wouldn't be here if he didn't feel well." "I'm just thinking of him," she insisted, though her eyes were darting around the room, assessing the optics. "I wouldn't want him to have an episode. It would be so embarrassing for him. And such a distraction on my special day." A distraction. That's what he was to her. Not my future husband, not a man she should have welcomed as a son, but a potential variable that could disrupt her meticulously planned event. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. "He won't be a distraction, Mom," I said, my voice firmer now. "He is my fiancé. He'll be standing by my side." She let out a little huff, a puff of air that dismissed my concerns entirely. "We'll talk about it later, dear. Let's not make a scene." The later came 2 weeks before the wedding. Liam had a minor flare-up. It wasn't catastrophic, just a few days of him being tired and needing to stick close to home. He was already feeling better, and we were confident he'd be back to 100% by the wedding day. I made the mistake of mentioning it to my mother on the phone when she called to ask if my maid of honor dress had been altered. "Oh, dear," she said, and the feigned sympathy in her voice was like nails on a chalkboard. "You see? This is exactly what I was worried about. It's a small flare, Mom. He's already improving." "He'll be fine," I said, already defensive. "Clara, I've made a decision," she said, her tone shifting from fake concern to icy resolve. "It's for the best. Liam can't come to the wedding." I was silent, the phone suddenly feeling heavy and cold against my ear. "What did you just say?" "I can't have the stress of worrying about him all day. I can't have my guests worried. And I certainly can't have my wedding photos ruined by him looking pale or, God forbid, needing to rush off. It's my day, Clara. It needs to be perfect. He will be more comfortable at home, and frankly, I will be too. It's not up for discussion." I looked across the living room at Liam, who was curled on the sofa with our cat, reading a book. He looked peaceful. He was the furthest thing from a distraction or a problem. He was my future. And my mother had just tried to erase him. "So that's it?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "You're banning my sick fiancé from your wedding because he's an inconvenience to your perfect day?" "Don't be so dramatic," she scoffed. "I'm being practical. You can still come, of course. You're my maid of honor. The audacity of it stole my breath. She didn't just want to ban my partner, she expected me to stand beside her and smile, endorsing her cruelty. In that moment, the years of her conditional love, her obsession with appearances, and her casual disregard for anything that didn't fit her narrative all coalesced into a single, sharp point of clarity. "No, Mom," I said, and the cold knot in my stomach turned into steel. "No, I can't." The silence on the other end of the line was heavy, accusatory. My mother wasn't used to the word no. Especially not from me. I had spent a lifetime navigating her moods, placating her ego, and shrinking myself to fit into the box she designed for her daughter. "What do you mean, no?" she finally sputtered, the icy control cracking to reveal the indignation beneath. "Clara, this is my wedding. You are my maid of honor. You don't just say no. You ban my fiancé," I said, my voice flat and devoid of the emotion churning inside me. I stood up and walked to the window, needing to look at something other than the comfortable life my mother was trying to tear apart. Liam is my family. We come as a set. If you are telling him he is not welcome, then you are telling me I am not welcome. Liam looked up from his book, his brow furrowed with concern. He could only hear my side of the conversation, but he knew my mother well enough to guess the context. "Don't be ridiculous," she shrieked, her voice rising in pitch. "You are choosing him over your own mother? Over your own family, on the most important day of my life? You're the one who made me choose," I shot back, a wave of anger finally breaking through my composure. "You did this. You decided that a man I love, a good and kind man who is dealing with a chronic illness, is less important than your floral arrangements and your seating chart. What kind of person does that? A person who wants a beautiful, happy day without complications," she cried. "Robert's family will be there. My friends. I want them to see me happy, not stressed and tending to a medical emergency." "A medical emergency?" I laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. "You think he's going to collapse in the aisle? Mom, he has Crohn's. He might need the bathroom a few more times than the average person. That's it. That's the complication you're willing to throw my relationship away for. Because my fiancé might use the restroom. My God." I could hear her breathing, ragged and furious. She was cycling through her tactics, searching for the one that would work. She landed on emotional blackmail. "I paid for your college education," she said, her voice dropping into a low, wounded tone. "I threw you that sweet 16 party you wanted so badly. I bought you your first car. After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me? By abandoning me at the altar?" It was a classic move, listing my entire life as a series of transactions for which she was now calling in the debt. But for the first time, it didn't work. The guilt she was trying to instill felt foreign, like a coat that no longer fit. "Those things were what a parent is supposed to do, Mom," I said quietly. "They aren't chips you get to cash in to justify being cruel. You are not the victim here. You are the one who issued an ultimatum. You are the one who decided a person's health makes them unworthy of attending a family celebration." I walked back and sat on the arm of the sofa, putting a hand on Liam's shoulder. He reached up and squeezed it, his eyes full of a sad understanding. "So this is your final decision?" my mother asked, her voice now dangerously cold. "You're throwing everything away for him?" "No," I said, looking directly at Liam. "I'm holding on to the one thing that actually matters. You made your choice, Mom. And I'm making mine. Liam and I will not be at your wedding. And until you can understand what you've done, until you can offer him a sincere, heartfelt apology, you and I are done. Don't call me. Don't text me. We have nothing more to say." Before she could respond, before she could unleash the next wave of guilt or rage, I ended the call. Then I turned off my phone. The silence in the apartment was absolute. Liam looked at me, his face a mixture of hurt and worry. "Clara, you didn't have to do that. It's your mom's wedding. I can just stay home. I don't want to be the reason. I cut him off, leaning down and kissing him, pouring all the love and fury and certainty I felt into it. "No," I said, pulling back to look him in the eyes. "You are never the reason for anything bad. You are the reason for everything good. She did this, not you. We are a team. Always. If she can't respect you, she doesn't get me. It's that simple." He searched my face, looking for any sign of doubt, any flicker of regret. He found none. A slow, relieved smile spread across his lips. He pulled me into a hug, burying his face in my hair. "I love you," he whispered. "I love you more," I said, holding on tight. We stayed like that for a long time, a two-person fortress against the storm my mother had created. The wedding was in 2 weeks. As far as I was concerned, my ties to it, and to her, had just been completely, irrevocably severed. The days that followed were a siege. My mother, true to form, didn't respect my request for no contact. She couldn't get through to my phone, so she deployed her army. Emails from my aunt, telling me I was breaking my mother's heart. Voicemails from her best friend, calling me a selfish, ungrateful child. Facebook messages from cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, all spouting the official party line, "Helen is devastated. Liam is very sick. Clara is being dramatic and needs to support her mother." They were what Liam called flying monkeys, sent to do her bidding. We ignored them all. We blocked numbers and email addresses, creating a digital cocoon. Inside our apartment, life was quiet. Liam's flare-up subsided, just as we knew it would, and he was back to his energetic self, a fact that only sharpened the injustice of it all. He felt guilty, a weight I tried to lift from him every day. "This isn't your fault," I'd tell him as we cooked dinner. "This is about her, not you." "I know," he'd say, "but I hate that I'm at the center of it." "I love that you're at the center of my life," I'd reply, and he would smile. We were a united front, and every ignored message, every deleted email, only made our bond stronger. Then, a week before the wedding, an unknown number called my phone. I almost ignored it, assuming it was another of my mother's soldiers. But something made me answer. "Hello?" I said, my tone wary. "Clara? It's Robert. My mother's fiancé." I braced myself for another lecture. "Robert." "Hello," I said coolly. "Listen, I know this is probably the last voice you want to hear right now," he said, and his tone surprised me. It wasn't accusatory, it was tired. And confused. "I just have to ask you something, and I'd appreciate a straight answer. Helen's story about why you're not coming to the wedding, it's not adding up." I paused. This was unexpected. "What did she tell you?" "She told me that Liam had a very serious, sudden downturn in his health," he explained. "That he's practically bedbound and that you've heroically decided to stay home to be his full-time caregiver. She's been telling everyone how selfless you are, but how heartbroken she is that you'll both miss the wedding. She even cried." I almost laughed. Of course. She hadn't painted me as the villain to him, she'd painted me as the martyr. It was a far more sympathetic role, one that garnered her pity while still achieving her goal of a Liam-free wedding. It was brilliant, in its own sociopathic way. "Robert," I said, taking a deep breath. "That is not what happened." "I didn't think so," he said quietly. "The way she talks about his illness, it's always with this sense of distaste. Like he's an inconvenience. When I asked if we should send flowers or a meal, she brushed it off and changed the subject to the new seating chart. It felt wrong. So, please. Tell me the real story." I had a choice. I could be guarded, or I could trust this man who was about to marry my mother. I looked over at Liam, who was listening with a curious expression. I decided to take the risk. So I told him everything. I told him about the conversation at the tasting. I told him about the phone call, the ultimatum, and her exact words, "A distraction, ruining the photos, my day needs to be perfect." I told him I wasn't being a martyr, I was taking a stand. I told him my mother had banned my healthy fiancé because the idea of his illness was aesthetically displeasing to her. He was silent for a long time after I finished. I could hear the faint sound of his breathing on the other end of the line. "Thank you for being honest with me, Clara," he finally said, and his voice was heavy with a profound disappointment. I had a feeling it was something like this. Helen wants a perfect life, and she thinks she can just airbrush out the parts she doesn't like. "That's Liam she's airbrushing, Robert," I said softly. "I know," he sighed. "And that's not right. Family isn't about perfect pictures. It's about being there for each other, especially when things aren't perfect. It's about loving people for who they are, sickness and health, right? Isn't that the whole point?" Tears pricked my eyes. He got it. This man my mother had chosen, a man I barely knew, understood the situation more clearly than anyone in my family. "I support your decision, Clara," he continued. 100%. You are doing the right thing. You're standing by your partner, and that's what a good person does. I am so deeply sorry for how Helen has treated you both." "Thank you, Robert," I whispered, genuinely moved. That means a lot." "I need to think about this," he said, his voice now sounding distant, troubled. "I have a wedding in a week to a woman who has shown a side of herself I find deeply disturbing. Thank you again for your honesty." He hung up. I stood in my kitchen, stunned. I had expected a fight, but instead, I had found an ally in the most unlikely of places. I told Liam the whole conversation. "Wow," he said, shaking his head in disbelief. "So he knows." "He knows," I confirmed. We didn't know what he would do with that knowledge. But for the first time since the ordeal began, I felt a flicker of something other than anger and resolve. It was a glimmer of hope. We were no longer alone in knowing the truth. And the truth, I've always believed, has a way of coming out. The day of the wedding arrived, bright and unseasonably warm. My phone, which I had turned back on, buzzed with a final, desperate text from my aunt. It's not too late to show up and surprise her. She would forgive everything. I deleted it without a reply. There was a strange hollowness to the morning. A part of me, the part conditioned by 28 years of being Helen's daughter, felt a pang of guilt. I imagined her getting her hair done, slipping into her expensive gown, her face a mask of bridal bliss. I was supposed to be there, zipping her dress, telling her she looked beautiful. Then I looked at Liam, who was making us pancakes, humming along to the radio. He was wearing an old t-shirt and pajama pants, and he looked more handsome to me than any man in a tuxedo. The guilt vanished, replaced by a quiet certainty. I was exactly where I was supposed to be. "So," he said, sliding a perfectly golden pancake onto my plate. "What's the plan for our official not the wedding day?" "I was thinking we could start by building a blanket fort and watching Labyrinth," I suggested. His face lit up. "An excellent plan." And then, I said, taking a bite of pancake, "we take a walk to that park with the willow trees, we come home, order the most expensive, decadent takeout we can find, and we toast to ourselves with cheap Prosecco." "You are a genius," he declared. "A protest date. I love it." And that's what we did. We shut out the world. We piled every pillow and blanket we owned in the living room and created a cozy cave. We watched David Bowie sing and dance, quoting every line. We held hands, and I felt a profound sense of peace. This was real. Our quiet, comfortable love was more real than any grand performance my mother could stage. Later, we walked to the park. It was the middle of a weekday, so it was nearly empty. Liam was full of energy, pointing out different types of dogs and making up silly backstories for them. He wasn't pale. He wasn't weak. He wasn't a distraction. He was just a man in love, enjoying a beautiful day with his fiancée. The thought of my mother's reasoning, that he might ruin the photos, seemed not just cruel, but utterly absurd. We took a selfie under a huge weeping willow, Liam kissing my cheek. I looked happier in that photo than I had in years. As evening fell, we ordered an obscene amount of sushi and opened the Prosecco. We sat on our living room floor, surrounded by the remnants of our blanket fort, and raised our glasses. To us, Liam said, his eyes sparkling. To choosing each other, always. To us, I echoed, my heart full. And to real love, not the kind that requires perfect lighting. We clicked our glasses. At that exact moment, my phone, which I'd left on the counter, began to buzz incessantly. It was around 7 p.m., prime time for wedding speeches. I figured it was a last-ditch effort from a family member who'd had too much champagne. Just ignore it, Liam said, popping a piece of salmon nigiri into his mouth. I will, I said. But the buzzing didn't stop. It was a string of frantic texts, one after another. Curiosity got the better of me. I walked over and picked up the phone. The messages were from my cousin, Sarah, one of the few who had remained neutral, sending me a simple thinking of you message earlier in the week. The texts read, in rapid succession. Sarah, OMG Clara. Sarah, are you sitting down? Sarah, you will not believe what just happened. Sarah, Robert just gave his speech. Sarah, holy S*****, Robert just gave his speech. A chill went down my spine. Liam looked at me, his expression questioning. What is it? He asked. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the flashing message bubble. I think Robert just did something. Another text came through before I could reply. Sarah, he just told everyone. Everything. My heart started to pound, a wild, frantic rhythm against my ribs. I looked at Liam, my eyes wide. The quiet, peaceful day was over. The reckoning had begun. My fingers trembled as I typed back to my cousin, Sarah. Me, what do you mean he told everyone? Tell me exactly what he said. Liam came and stood behind me, reading the screen over my shoulder. The sushi and Prosecco were forgotten. The cozy atmosphere in our apartment had been replaced by a tense, electric anticipation. Sarah's reply came as a long block of text, typed out in a breathless rush. Sarah, okay, so everyone just finished their main course. The DJ announces the groom's speech. Robert gets up, he looks amazing, Mom looks so happy. He starts off normal, thanking everyone for coming, thanking her parents. He talks about how lucky he is to have found Helen. Standard stuff. Then, his whole tone changed. My breath hitched. I could picture it perfectly, the clinking glasses, the soft lighting, my mother preening at the head table, basking in the glow of her perfect day. Sarah's next text came through. Sarah, he put down his champagne glass. He looked right at Mom and said he wanted to talk about what family really means. He said family is about support, loyalty, and unconditional love. Then he said, which is why it's with a heavy heart that I have to acknowledge the two people who should be here tonight but aren't, my new stepdaughter, Clara, and her fiancé, Liam. Liam let out a soft, oh my God. Sarah, the whole room went quiet. Mom's smile froze on her face. He kept going. He said, you may have heard a story that Liam is gravely ill and Clara is staying home to care for him. While I admire her devotion, that is not the truth. The truth is, my dear wife, in her pursuit of a perfect day, chose to ban Liam from our wedding. I had to sit down. I sank onto a kitchen chair, my hand covering my mouth. Liam's hand found my shoulder, gripping it tightly. Sarah, Clara, I'm not kidding, he said it all. He said Liam's only crime was having a chronic illness he can't control. He said that Helen had told her own daughter that her partner, her future husband, was a distraction and an inconvenience who might ruin the photos. He said he had spent the last week wrestling with this knowledge, and that he could not, in good conscience, begin a marriage based on such a foundation of cruelty and exclusion. The sheer, brutal, public honesty of it was staggering. This wasn't a quiet confrontation. This was a detonation in the center of my mother's carefully constructed universe. Sarah, Mom was trying to get him to stop, whispering Robert, no, but he just kept talking. He looked at the whole room and said, I am ashamed. I am ashamed that this happened, and I apologized to Clara and Liam on behalf of our family. A family is only as strong as how it treats its most vulnerable members. And then he picked up his glass. I held my breath, waiting for the final blow. "Sarah," he raised his glass and said, "so I would like to propose a toast. Not to us, not yet. But to Clara and Liam, who know more about love, honor, and loyalty than anyone here tonight. May we all learn from their example." And then he drank. Clara, the room was dead silent. A few people clapped, kind of nervously. "Your mom looks like she's seen a ghost." A few of her friends just got up and left. "It's a catastrophe. Her perfect day is completely ruined." I dropped the phone onto the table. The words swam in my vision. Ruined. He had taken her most prized possession, her public image, and shattered it in front of everyone she had sought to impress. Liam knelt in front of me, taking my hands in his. "He did it," Liam said, his voice full of awe. "He actually did it." A laugh escaped my lips. It was a wild, hysterical sound, bubbling up from a place of deep, cathartic release. Tears streamed down my face, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of shock, of vindication, of an overwhelming gratitude for the stranger who had become my champion. An hour later, as the chaos from Sarah's texts subsided, my phone rang. It was Robert. I answered, putting it on speaker. "Clara," he said, his voice weary but firm. "I imagine you've heard." "We heard," I said softly. "Robert, why?" "Because it was the right thing to do," he said simply. "I told Helen I couldn't marry her under false pretenses. I couldn't stand there and smile, knowing she had been so cruel to you. What she did was wrong. It needed to be said. Out loud." What happens now?" I asked. "Now," he sighed, "Helen and I are going to have a very long, very difficult conversation. I told her our marriage depends on two things, her getting into serious therapy to deal with this obsession with appearances, and her giving you and Liam a genuine, unconditional apology. Not a text. Not an email. A real one. If she can't do that, then this marriage was over before it began." I was speechless. "Thank you, Robert," Liam said into the phone. I don't know what else to say. "Thank you." "You don't have to say anything, son," Robert replied. "You just get well, and you two keep loving each other the way you do. That's the important part." After he hung up, I looked at Liam. The weight that had been sitting on our relationship for weeks, the shadow cast by my mother's ultimatum, was gone. It had been exposed to the light and had disintegrated. The future with my mother was a vast, uncertain question mark. But my future with Liam had never been clearer. We had been cut out of her perfect day, so we had created our own. And in the end, it was her perfect day that lay in ruins, while ours, built on loyalty, truth, and a love that made room for imperfection, was stronger and brighter than ever. We had been tested, and we had not broken. We had chosen each other. And that was a celebration worth more than any wedding.